Oh no, where's the other one? Oh, that's the one I want. Oh, this is the one I want.
That's just the way it's in.
Okie dokie. Ow. Ow, 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 ow. Sucks getting old.
Good evening, welcome. The essential point of what is being presented here, what it's all about, is that the actuality that is here is the field of your experience. All the information that's appearing in it is like a virtual information display. I expect some of you are familiar with the old Star Trek TV series where they had a holodeck that is basically creates a virtual reality projection of holograms that seems to be actual when there's nothing particularly there. That's a very good analogy for what this is. There seems to be all of this information, but all that there really is the energy that it's constituted of. Like, for example, in the holodeck, however the holograms were projected, one can imagine light of some kind. All that was really there was light, but it looks like all of these various, objects and environments and so on and so forth. So likewise, when you see your field of vision, all you're seeing is light. All you can see is light. You've never seen anything other than light in your entire life. Never have, never will. There's nothing to see but light. The eyes see light. They perceive photons. You don't see people, you don't see things, you don't see environments, you see light. Now the light seems to be very intensely patterned, and the intelligence looks at these patternings and abstracts that maybe these patternings are readouts of actually existing conditions out there in some world that may exist out there and so on and so forth. But the immediate fact, the concrete fact, is just the presence of the energy that the experience field is presenting. In the case of field of vision, what we call light. In the case of field of hearing, what we call sound. In the case of field of mentality, what we call thought. And it's basically, I argue, it's basically just a continuous spectrum of some kind of mysterious energy that is what light actually consists of, thought actually consists of, sound actually consists of, and basically all phenomena that are perceived are essentially patternings within this energy that is the medium of this display. So it's extremely simple. It's just, there's the display of the experiential field. And all the content and all of the seeming events and all the extrapolation and abstraction of what is being experienced and what it consists of and so on and so forth is abstracted out of interpretations of the patterns of that this energy seems to present us. So it's extremely simple. It's extremely simple. And this doesn't really change anything because this has always been the case. I mean, even if you ask a neurologist or a perceptive scientist who studies mechanism of perception, they'll say, yeah, you don't experience the world. You experience electrochemical activity in your brain, which appears as a pattern, which, theoretically corresponds to some actual events out there. But there's no way to know that because you never actually experience those. All you experience is the patterning. And then it's a hypothesis that it actually corresponds to something in some sense. But then we dream, and when we wake up, we experience essentially a dream can be just as concrete and objective and detailed as waking experience. And yet you wake up and there was nothing there. It didn't even happen. But when we're awake, no, but this is the real world. This is really here. This is really outside. And it may or may not be. The point isn't that the real world isn't here. The point is you can't know. Because the reality is the only contact you have is with the energy of the display, the energy that presents as the information of that constitutes the experiential field. And, So this is, logically, this is actually not earth-shaking. It's really actually common sense. But the implications of what this feels like, the feeling tone of realizing that, oh, there's this mysterious bubble present of information readout, that seems to be being perceived in mysterious ways. And every aspect of how that happens and what the mechanism is and what the elements that constitute it are all just theoretical. You can't know. You can't know what consciousness is, if anything. You can't know what the energy that constitutes the information is, if anything. And that's all that is actually undeniably self-verifyingly present. And the implications of when you see this, the feeling tone of what the implications are, what you are, oh, I am a bizarre transcendental bubble of information presentation, period. And the bodies and the entities and the circumstances and history and all of the details are, abstract interpretations of patterns that seem to be appearing as a readout within this information display that is the field of perception, the field of experience. That the field of experience exists, whatever that means, is the sole fact. And anything else is guesswork. Anything else is hypothesis. And that, again, that doesn't necessarily negate any particular hypothesis, but it's unverifiable. The only thing that is absolutely bankable, that is absolutely certain, is the presence of the experiential field. And there's only one, which is very interesting, mine. You may say the same thing if you actually exist, but I can't know that because you're just an apparition in my experiential field. Of course, I'm an apparition as a body and as a personality. I am also an apparition in my experiential field. So Peter Brown, the human being, is a pure hypothesis. But the presence of this experiential field, this right here, is absolutely certain. And I am that. I'm this. So anyway, that's a rather simple way of putting the essential principle that all of this consists of. And then all of the ramifications and ins and outs and nuances and implications are interesting, but they all follow from this fundamental fact. For my next joke.
That sandpaper out.
Ouch. I offered you Kleenex.
And interesting, but not surprisingly, if you look at all the great spiritual traditions, their core teachings amount to the same thing. In Advaita, everything is the self. It's just another way of putting the same fact. There is this one presence of actuality that everything consists of. And so on and so forth. Anyway, you can, if you're interested, you can follow that out for yourself. But it's really just common sense, but it's very contrary to the worldview that the average person, one supposes, relates to.
Does the personality ever disappear?
It comes and goes. Every time you go into deep sleep, the personality essentially disappears.
Mhm.
You might start dreaming and a different personality or variation of your personality might appear. And even your personality has many that are not particularly consistent or coherent with each other. They can appear from time to time. Because the personality, again, is just another information pattern appearing in the experiential field. And it appears sporadically, it comes and goes, it appears with varying degrees of coherence, and it's not particularly consistent. You can argue, I think quite rightly, that it may seem to have a dominant sort of a flavor or nature that is essentially consistent, and that may be so. But it's not resolvable precisely as being that. So all conditions come and go degrees. The only thing that doesn't come and go is the experiential field itself. That's presented in it comes and goes with absolute dynamism. And essentially, the personality, the body, history, basically everything is information that presents itself dynamically within the experiential field. The experiential field is plain vanilla. It doesn't have a findable nature. The nature seem to be in the things that appear within it. Wonderful, beautiful, intelligent, sweet people can appear within it. Dog shit can appear within it. Genocide and wars can appear within it. Gorgeous, beautiful sunny days can appear within it. Hurricanes and destruction and earthquakes can appear within it. But the experiential field itself, in the tiniest bit, impinged upon by any of these things, qualities that come and go within it.
A field of observation in deep sleep. What is its nature? Because it's imageless.
It's relatively more imageless than perhaps a waking condition or a dream condition, but it's not absolutely informationless. I would say there's some degree of amorphous sort of energy flows or presences. Who knows what? It's not a simple nothing. Even in very heavy-handed general anesthesia, if you ever had major surgery and that sort of thing, which is pretty close to nothing. It's not an actual non-existence. There's a very, very, very subtle presence there. It's still, in other words, it's still an experience, albeit a very rarefied experience. But it's still just a presence within the experiential field.
That's part of the reason they started changing the way they behaved in surgeries. Is because the doctors used to do, when I was in training, they would say the rudest things about the patients and stuff.
Oh, sure.
And now it's like you play certain kind of music and you're supposed to talk nicely.
Yeah, because patients can end up actually remembering what
Right.
you said.
Because you don't really know what the person is absorbing.
Yeah, because the patient is actually floating, their astral body is actually floating around in the ceiling.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they do.
I know.
And this perspective is revolutionary, mainly because it contrasts so radically with the normal human orientation. As humans, typically, we're very obsessed with and very interested in the patterns and the information and the entities and the conditions and ourselves, our own patterns that we identify as our own, our bodies, our health, our situation in circumstances and so. And we're very drawn to the information, but typically we essentially completely ignore the medium, and which is, again, is interesting, since the medium is the only real actuality. The information is the presence of the information is undeniable, but the quality of the information is up for grabs. You know, there could be misinformation. It could be exactly the opposite of what's actually happening. You know, so that's one hypothesis. You know, like in wartime, you know, where governments feed each other deliberate misinformation. You know.
Just wartime.
Yeah, well, it's always war out there. Right?
Yeah.
Peter? I was wondering if you could talk about, and if this is just superfluous, please don't talk about it, but
Now he has to.
there's, you know, we spoken before about there's really not a center to experience, and also location and non-location, and then you just, and in your book, you mentioned, and on your website, you mentioned about specific phrase of disembodied consciousness. And then you just mentioned out-of-body experience. And the one thing that all due respect to Eckhart Tolle, I can't read them. I can't. There's too much weird stuff. But I saw a little snippet of a video about this identification of consciousness with form. And this whole thing is starting to kind of coalesce into, I guess, a topic that I am experientially interested in.
Sure.
I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Sure. Well, presence is consciousness. Nothing can be present unless it is present in consciousness. Or you could say presence is perception, because nothing can be present unless it's perceived to be present. Otherwise, it's just an abstraction. It's like the pink elephants that are dancing around in the middle of the room. They aren't there because they aren't an experience, unless you experience them. I mean, now they're there as a thought because I said it, but they're present as a thought. But at any rate, so presence is consciousness, is experience. Now, you know, and the full field of experience, I mean, almost axiomatically, is consciousness, or it wouldn't be present, it wouldn't exist. Even if you go to the very fringes, the most rarefied aspects of what is present experientially, the fact that it is present experientially at all means that consciousness is perceiving it. It's present in consciousness, because there's no other kind of presence. That's presence means present in consciousness. As a phrase, it doesn't imply that there actually is consciousness, or there is anything whatsoever. Present in consciousness is it includes what we're addressing here. And the field of experience is very interesting, and it's very weird and slippery, as of course we've talked about it from many different angles. But centralization or focus or localization is largely a matter of focus. And focus, again, is a very curious phenomena that seems to occur more or less spontaneously within the experiential field. You know, typically what is more in focus is felt to be more sharp, more present, more up close, more centralized, and what is you know, less in focus, less so, pretty much across the board. But again, this is arbitrary. So you know, what I would say is ultimately the case, what's absolutely the case, is that there is no center at all. The consciousness itself is the center. Now, the field of experience seems to be extended. It seems to have dimension. You know, it seems to have not necessarily literally spatial dimension, but dimension of size in some maybe non-spatial way. I mean, for example, thought. You go looking at the field of thought, the mind. It's not actually literally a space. It's not a physical space. It doesn't have an up and down, left or right, literally. But it has it somehow has a breadth of readout. And again, not necessarily spatial breadth, but in some sense there's a breadth there. So the field of experience seems to have an inherent extension within itself. But that extension might be virtual extension. The field of experience could be spatially a point that somehow experiences itself as dimensional. There's no way to know because you can't see it from outside. Where was I? What was I talking about? What were we talking about? I went to a point, it was like from an old TV set, it goes, okay. And so the whole issue of location is very slippery because again, it's biased by these issues of focus, it's biased by issues of identification. But in actual fact, anything that is present in consciousness. And something that's out of focus is as actual,
right,
as present in the field of experience as something that's in focus, even though what's in focus is so much more dominant and what's out of focus is so much more recessive. But it's still there. I mean, you know, you might say it analogously in an audio field like music. You know, whatever is loud, like say you're talking about a stereo, like you're mixing music in stereo. You know, whatever is loud and in the center seems to be up close and personal, centralized, localized, and whatever, you know, some very slight reverb or something that's just in the background you hardly even notice it at all. But in actual fact, it is just as there as what is loud. It's just there, not with loudness. The amplitude is lower, but the presence is not any less. It's no less actual, and what's louder is no more actual, even though it's, you know, got seemingly a bigger share of the whatever.
So by disembodied, you're kind of saying it's the full field. The full field is the experiential field. Your body's in that. It's a small part of that whole thing.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah, embodiment, as in a physical embodiment, is completely a construct. It's completely contrived because the true embodiment is the experiential field. The experiential field is your body, and then all sorts of forms appear within that, and all those forms are essentially of equal value to each other. You know, I see my hand, I see your hand, and your hand is no less present than my hand in the visual field, right? So there's no. This is not actually special in terms of the visual field. Everything that appears with equal. You know, it's one value. It's not like this is more special than that, or this is more real than that, or something like that.
Very good. Thank you.
I mean, you can't get to the bottom of this. You know, you can't take that issue and sort of definitively pin it down. But it's easy to play with it. It's easy to poke at it when you know what to look at. When you know you look at the experiential field and see for yourself, you know, and these questions are addressable.
Because it used to be a semantic, but it used to be a semantic thing for me, saying, well, things appear in consciousness. So, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, but it's still, the wall's over there. But now it's those things are beginning to be experiential. Well, no, consciousness is over there.
Over there is a version of here.
Yeah.
And here is a version of here. You know, when you see the sun, when you experience the sun, which is way over there, you experience it here. Here in the experiential field. The only here is in the experiential field. That is here. And it seems to be a here that's made of many theirs, but that's an abstraction. It's all equally here. You know, the vision of your body is equally here as the vision of my hand. I mean, right now my hand looks bigger than your body, but that's just perspective. You know, I mean, all of dimension is basically perspective. So perspective is the culprit. You could argue there's no space at all. There's just perspective, and so space is a hypothesis that's generated because of the phenomena of perspective. You know, you look smaller. Sometimes things look smaller, and sometimes they get bigger, and then they get smaller. You know, if I walk away from you, you get smaller and smaller. So I interpret that as, oh, there's more and there's increased space between us. But that's a theory. Space is a theory based upon, like all interpretations are theories based upon interpretations of the information of the patternings that appear in the experiential field. But the only absolute quantity that can be found is the experiential field itself. And all subcategories like spatiality and all that are inferences. Again, they're hypotheses.
That's the same as what I was talking with you this morning about time as well, you know, about history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You know, all of the ways the patterning seem to be ordered with regard to each other are all basically hypotheses. The only actuality is the presence of the energy itself, the readout, you might say, of the patternings that show up in experience. And then the way those patternings behave is a given, but any implications whatsoever about those patternings behavior is hypothesis. So yeah, there is what we call memory, there is what we call thought, there is what we call vision, and these are actualities of energy presence in experiential field. But the implication that memory is of a past is all of a sudden you're off into hypothesis. That what we call memory appears is fact, it's actual energy presence, right? But as soon as you step off into ordering it or structuring it, you go off into theory.
You finished up the introduction saying this and this, whatever you said, and then I am that.
Right.
I would say I am that. Like I don't see or feel my experience, whatever it is, as being I am that. It's more like I have that.
Okay, but is there a you that's separate from that has it? For you to have that, that sort of implies there's a that and then a you, and there's some degree of disjunction between those two.
Yeah, there is.
Is there? Where is the you outside the experiential field?
No, but I must act like it is.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, you can feel like it is. We all know that. You can feel like anything, but that doesn't necessarily make it so.
Well, how do you make that jump?
Well, just look and see. Yeah, look. You play with it. It's like, okay, where am I? You know, so you can have the theory that, okay, here's the experiential field, and I'm somewhere floating around wherever, here, whatever, here, there, whatever you want to say, looking at the experiential field. But can you actually find a you, and can you actually find any distance between you and the experiential field? I mean, the way it seems to me is the experiential field appears and is, in its appearance, it is perceived. And there's no findable perceiver. There's no findable, perceiving. It's all just collapses on itself. It's like when you dream at night. I'll speak first person. When I dream at night, I can say, I was dreaming, and the dream appeared to me. But that's more of a verbal circumlocution, because in actuality, when the dream is present, there's no dreamer that can be found. It's just the single event is present, and the theory that there is an agent that is doing the dreaming or the perceiving the dreaming, and then an object that is somehow being created and all that is more logical argument after the fact, right? I mean, we're used to thinking of it that way, so it can seem to be that that's just how it is. But that's the slippery nature of assuming that our hypotheses are objectively true. If like right now, let's say you're experiencing your experience, right? Your experience is being experienced. Can you find an experiencer?
An experiencing?
An experiencer. What is seeing your experience? Where's it seeing it from?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, of course. You go look. I mean, you go look. You can really. I mean, put some time in on this, and you can really look, and you still won't find anything. It's clearly being experienced, so to speak. But an experiencer in a location or as an entity or as any coherence whatsoever just can't be found. It's just the simple fact of experiencing is present. You can't find the experienced and you can't find the experiencer, even though our verbal logic implies that they would be there. But if you look at the phenomena itself, you just find one thing. You find this here. That is experience being experienced, right? But all of that verbiage doesn't actually create separate things. Wait a minute, you just play with it and poke around, see for yourself, see what you see.
I think there's something that I'm gonna be able to figure out, though. It's a problem.
that's always very iffy. Red flag. There's an answer out there somewhere, and I'm going to find it.
So you could just say that the experiential field appears full stop.
Yeah, exactly so.
Is that how you sort of experience reality yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. And even that it is that is too much.
Right.
It does this.
Right.
You know.
Makes it much easier, doesn't it?
I mean, it is. It is in itself. It has no implied logic, no necessary structure or logic other than the simple fact alone. The fact is the fact, and everything else comes with, and doesn't add or subtract from the fact. The fact appears as that.
It's interesting how we come up with these elaborate configurations.
Sure. Yeah, and it's mostly, I think it's mostly due to our language. It's mostly due to semantics. We have subjects and, we have nouns and verbs. And so if it says nouns and verbs and we're describing things in terms of nouns and verbs, that implies objects and that applies actions. Whereas objects and actions can't actually be found in reality. There's nothing but action, there's nothing but object, and there's no division. But you describe, I walked into this room, sat in the chair, and now am talking. So that creates a me,
Yes.
a room, a verb of motion, all these, it breaks it down to all these supposed subconditions that, according to the language, it implies that they exist as autonomous entities, autonomous things.
You don't think the language was a representation of what people thought that they were perceiving?
Well, sure, but it goes both ways. The language is a representation of what you think, but also what you think is shaped by the language you use to describe it.
Because different languages have
Right,
different
but original, yeah.
experience too. So how can that be? I mean, in English, like in Russian, we have cases, which means we have, he said, she said, they said, which is so much more complex than English. So.
Yeah, and yet the world isn't actually more complex than this world.
It is in Russia.
Well, yeah, Russia is. Okay, I'll take it back.
Native American languages have very few nouns compared to ours, and more verbs.
And so if you were in the habit of describing things in that language, you would just have a bias, a structural bias towards thinking more in terms of action and less in terms of objects,
Exactly,
for example.
yes.
But you'd still be sectioning yourself off from radiant presence or what is.
Maybe,
Perhaps,
maybe not.
but you don't have to, Again, radiant presence isn't the opposite of anything. The experiential field is not the opposite of anything. Language actually refers to nothing other than this. But it does so inaccurately if you follow the implications of the structure of language. In other words, if you gullibly assume that language was flawlessly constructed to accurately reflect reality, and language has to have the structure it does because reality reflects that structure, I would say you'd be sorely mistaken. But when the way I get around this is I say there's two ways to see language. You can relate to language definitionally, or you can relate to language referentially. If you relate to language definitionally, that means you assume what a word refers to is what its definition is. So if you look in the dictionary and, word is defined as this, that, and the other, then that means this, that, and the other actually exists. Whereas if you use words referentially, the word refers to the reality that is present, and no more, no less. And if the reality deviates from the definition of the word, then the definition's wrong, not the reality.
And that referentiality comes from your own experience.
Of course.
Right.
And which is all you're ever referring to anyway, so why not cut to the chase? You know, it's like, it's using language, words are like signs pointing to actuality, and the meaning of a sign, the meaning of an arrow is what it points to. So, you know, the meaning of you is this actuality that is there, that is you, not like someone's idea or definition or description of what and who you are, which is an absurdity.
With words, what helped me is to sort of think of them, what they are really are categories. You know, like when I say chair, I can be looking at that thing with the red light on it, and I know it's a chair. It's a category of things that have a certain qualities.
Right.
And I can refer to chair in the abstract, and you know more or less what I meant because I'm referring to those things.
Right.
And in the same way, when I say Peter, it's still a category.
Sure.
It's a category of information that keeps kind of
Right.
being.
But it's an unlimited, it's a category referring to an unlimited and ultimately unknown infinity.
Yeah. But the
I mean,
sense of,
I am Peter, but exactly what that is and exactly what the set of ways I could behave or present is an unknown entity.
right, a category.
Yeah.
So what that helps with is things don't get solid there, and you can still use words quite well because they're just representing a way to relate.
Sure. But again, relating and relation in actuality is experiential. So again, it devolves to the actuality, the immediacy and actuality of the experiential field, rather than some abstractions of definitions. So still that's working with them what I would call relationally rather than definitionally.
Relationally rather than definition.
Words relating to actuality, the meaning of a word is that which it relates to, rather than the meaning of the word is its definition.
Okay.
It's like being a realist or a theorist. You know, the letter of the law or the spirit of the law kind of thing. You know, the letter of the law is don't drive over 55. The spirit of the law is don't be an asshole, don't get caught, don't get in an accident. You know, and if you do that in reality, you get along fine.
Yeah.
But the letter of the law, the definitional thing, no, you don't drive over 55 whatsoever, 56, no.
Everything, our sense of things, I think, is this quality of implication. And I think I'm kind of zeroing in the sense of, well, how that gets going.
I'm sorry, I didn't
How
follow
that
that.
gets going, this sense of implication.
Sure.
And it's like one thing is happening at any time. Like I'm seeing red light, right? So there's that. And then but that's all that's happening. There's no other quality going on.
But you see, that's not literally true. You know, because no experience is not isolated from its field. When you see the red, you could say, I see a red light, and that's factually true. But when you look at what that actually consists of, you're seeing, you're seeing light. The light is a field. It's inconsistent. It's fuzzy, and there's other aspects that are contained in that. So it's sort of basically a bottomless pit of detail, of nuance that doesn't resolve into just being a red light that you see.
Referring to that, yes, so that's all true.
And all of that has implication. All of that has informational content and suggestion, and the mind free associates on the basis of that, and it all spins off into an infinity of of implication just around that one seed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean if I dragged you away from your point.
No, it's something I'm working on, so.
Well, me too. It's a work in progress, right? The spiritual field is very interesting. In one sense, it itself could be thought of as being like a perfectly clear window. And typically the window is so transparent that we're not aware of the window. We're more interested in what we're seeing, what we think we're seeing through it, all the information. But of course, it's not actually like that, because it's not like there's a window and then information as two conditions. But seeing it that way as a sort of a halfway step to being with it, to acknowledging the elephant in the room that's not being acknowledged, can be useful.
It's like the two always go together. They never,
Yeah,
never
of course.
without the other.
Sure. The experiential field is its information that it presents. But the information that it presents is just the experiential field. It's not necessarily an actual literal world and actual literal entities and literal conditions and so on and so forth.
So, experiencing the unknown, or the infinity or transcendence, it seems as if, in a sense, the definition, or the really concrete definition, somehow has to be interrupted or fall away a bit.
Sure.
And so at that point, the whole idea of that there's something more, or these infinite dimensions
Right.
and everything, that also falls away because there's no words. I mean,
Right.
you can't put that in
Exactly. Yeah.
words.
The actuality is absolutely beyond description. So all these descriptions are provisional and evocative, not literally true. I mean, this is an important point. Every single thing I've said and is talked about in this retreat has been bullshit. None of it is accurate. None of it is literally true. None of it is precise, because what is true cannot be said. It's an infinity. And so the best you can do is talk about it evocatively, talk about it, with implication, and hopefully in a useful way. But it cannot be precisely put. So anything that is said is an approximation and is essentially wrong, because anything that is said will deviate by whatever degrees from the actuality. So it's important not to be too literal with language, simply because language cannot accurately capture.
Yeah, but all kinds of things start falling away. I mean,
Of course.
Where am I?
Yeah, because there are no things. That there are things is an inaccurate oversimplification like language. It's all, all of the ways we imagine and structure it are all child's play. They're all silly approximations, and the thing itself is the thing itself, period.
But you can feel that thing that can't be said.
You've never felt anything else. There's nothing else to feel. I mean, it's totally available. It's because it can't be indicated. It indicates itself, and nothing other than itself can accurately indicate it. And it's all very paradoxical because, of course, language and words are it. So language and words, even though language and words can't capture it or indicate it, they can capture it and indicate it. So, But no, yeah, reality is completely available. It's immediate, nothing, reality, nothing but absolute naked total reality has ever been experienced or perceived, period. But the nature of what it is so astounding and non-linear and slippery and infinite and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. More words, more bullshit, more inaccuracy, and yet true. that it's even though you've never seen anything else, it's very easy to mistake. That's what we're all very familiar with.
Seems bizarre. It's almost the question, where am I becomes, where did I go? The answer is nowhere, ever.
Yeah. So,
And then I come back.
come back from not having gone
Yeah,
anywhere.
right.
I didn't go anywhere, but I'm back.
This is a hypothetical bubble for you to promptly burst, but sometimes when you'll say in the meditations, you talk about the bubble of experience. What is this sitting on? What's holding this up?
Right.
And every time you say that, some part of me that's not my brain can not locate, because that's not, no words are right, but there's not nothing. And it's not that it's sitting on something because it has to be within the bubble in a way, but there's a sense that there's something I can't put my non-conceptual finger on that is present there.
I agree.
So what is that?
Can't say.
It's you.
It's not an experience.
But why is it, what part of my brain wants to, well, no, Michael, that has to be in the, if it's there, then it's here, this here, now.
Only logically.
Right.
Who says?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, this is probably extreme silliness to even explore this, but my sense of the experiential field, first of all, has no boundary, it has no edge, it has no end, and yet it kind of gets more and more and more rarefied, seemingly, experientially, as I try and push to go to the outside sides of it, so to speak. But it never becomes zero, and that doesn't, and no conclusions can be drawn from that, seemingly. And even that is the case, it can't be said for that it's certain. But it seems like it never, it just sort of becomes more and more and more rarefied forever. Yeah, so again, I don't know, I mean, I think Nisargadatta put it that beingness is just a tiny spark within non-beingness, which is the real condition. And to me, this is kind of looking at this. So the whole experiential field is beingness, and it ultimately exists and it consists of the field of non-beingness, which it is a little bubble in, a little spark there.
That's that non-feeling, that's that non-conceptual thing, that however foggy and amorphous it gets forever, that if I were to go 19 parsecs past the last part of the fog, there is something.
Exactly, and again, this is sort of fun, but it's kind of like how many angels can have dance on the head of a pin, because you don't. Obviously, it doesn't leave you anywhere to stand. But it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. The point of these kinds of questions or sort of koans I pose in the meditation is not to have any informational content, but just to sort of as a startlement to inspire just looking or or investigation, or just kind of, well, check it out. Look for something you've never thought to even look for before. I mean, the idea that everything is in the experiential bubble, and what's it sitting on? I mean, it's nonsense, right. But it's a nonsense that is like, whoa. Hopefully it's a destabilizer. Yeah, it's not meant to imply anything or not.
realize that it's like, we keep saying there isn't anything stable and it's all weird and transcendental, endless. And then I keep watching myself trying to going into my either or pattern with things. It's just kind of like, and then I say, well, that was whatever. I guess for Michelle. And then it's like, I kind of think that I understand what you're saying. And then I go right back into.
Well, we're all very familiar with this. It's a very normal human mode, to have, things are A or not A.
Right.
If it is this, then it isn't that. If it's male, then it's not female. If it's female, it's not male. If it's light, then it's not dark. If it's dark, it's not, this whole mutual exclusion. And, we all know how that works. We all do it all the time. But experience actually deviates from that very profoundly.
Right.
And the point is not to never do either or, but the point is to notice that there's alternatives in the way things actually work that is not like that. So you don't just be locked into a simplistic either or that you expect the entirety of the universe to conform to.
Yeah, it's pretty insidious.
No,
I've
of course
noticed
it
the
is.
last 4 questions I've asked you, I kind of said, well, it's like, I just figured it out, and you go, no. I mean, you don't say it, well, you kind of say that.
Yes, she does.
And then I just kind of like, oh,
I try to give you a kinder, gentler no.
No, it's
A
fine.
kinder,
No,
gentler
I
wrong.
don't feel offended, but it's like, now I'm like noticing, I keep doing the same thing, so. Maybe
But it's
I'll notice
interesting.
it in a way that kind of expands in some way.
But there's all these modes, and the mind just goes to all these modes of approaching things. And nothing is excluded, they're all here, they're all possible. But the actuality is always beyond any of its modes. So the mind uses this algorithm or that algorithm or the other algorithm, and that's all doable, it's cool. But this is always beyond any of that.
Right.
If perceiving and consciousness are one and the same, in what way can it be said that I am not my body?
Well, you are your body, but you are, it depends on what you mean by your body.
As the total perception,
Right. Well,
body and mind.
right. Well, in ordinary materialist theory, perception is a byproduct of the body. It's a byproduct of the functioning of the senses and the central nervous system and so on and so forth. But in terms of the presence of the experiential field, that's not necessarily true. It may seem to be that way, but it may not literally be that way. For example, in a dream, you may seem to have a body, and that body may seem to be walking through an environment and interacting and all of that. And that body may even seem to have senses, but the eyes of the body in the dream aren't actually seeing anything. The dreaming consciousness sees it, and so on and so forth. Even though it can appear, because of the inconceivable detail that the patterning can appear in, it can appear as if that's the case, as if the body is seeing. And likewise, with us, we have, the normal worldview is, perception is a byproduct of my body, and my senses and my central nervous system are doing all of that. I close my eyes and vision stops, and I open my eyes and vision begins. And so empirically, it's very easy to say, well, the eyes are what sees. But that could be circumstantial. It could be a coincidence. I'm not saying it is, but you can't say that it's not that either. I mean, there is certainly a coincidence with body functioning and perception, but to suppose that it's a causal relationship, that the body is the prime cause and the perception is the result, is a hypothesis. It can't really be known. All you can say is there's a coincidence, there's a synchronicity of things seeming to.
But we're also saying that consciousness is perception.
It seems to me that I would say they're one and the same. You can't find a separate
It's
one.
very difficult to draw a line between them, other than to say maybe one is container and the other is content.
Yeah, sure. If you could, but then we'd have to find the one and the other and find a meaningful, discontinuity between the two. And you can't find a this and a that. It doesn't seem to break down clearly into two separate things. So it's very interesting. I mean, there are many strong arguments for all sorts of hypotheses, and certainly the materialistic hypothesis and the hypothesis of, the central nervous system being the generator and the mechanism of perception and all that is a very strong argument, and it has a lot of detail to support it. But it still is ultimately a hypothesis, because does all of that elaborate mechanism appear in consciousness at conception, and is consciousness pre-existent? In other words, is consciousness doing all that the same way that consciousness does a dream? Imagine that consciousness very elaborately dreams the existence of the body, and dreams that the body functions with its senses and central nervous system and biology and all the incredible cell structure. And all of that projection appears within consciousness for the course of the lifespan. And at death, all of that body dissipates as a functional entity, but the conscious field that generated it in the first place doesn't. I mean, that's another hypothesis. You can't know. And that is just as viable a hypothesis. Of course, we'll find out before very long, perhaps. It's sort of which came first, the chicken or the egg. There's certainly a profound coexistence of all of these levels of phenomena, but it's really hard to know what's cause and what's effect, if anything. It's a kind of certainly it's a profound alignment, a profound synchronicity of all of these events. But the supposition the materialist supposition is matter is primary. There's a big bang, and so then there's all these atoms, and the nature of the atoms is they structure themselves, and eventually DNA evolves, and then the complexities of DNA cause life forms to evolve, and out of life form these complex bodies evolve, and then these sensory and nervous system perceiving systems evolve and all that. I mean, that's the standard materialist sort of theory. But you can also look at, maybe there's an organizing principle that is inherent in the primordial being itself that has a nature to show up as the structure of matter, as the structure of life forms, as the structure of all of the seeming behavior of all of these specific systems. But the systems are just reflections of this inherent structure that is not explicit but implicit. There's another theory, right? Lots of theories. But the fact is, the root fact is, in terms of, just historically, in terms of development, the original fact is the presence of the experiential field. When you were born, the experiential field is there before you know you have a body. The presence of the experiential field is the original and the prime.
But being
fact.
born is hearsay.
Exactly, so.
No proof that.
Right, and it's hearsay that occurs within the experiential field. So again, it's circular. You can't get outside it. So the point is, it's unresolvable. You can't settle it definitively anyway. There's all of these possibilities, and they're all profoundly interesting and potentially meaningful. But what it resolves to is just up for grabs. It's anybody's guess. But I like to argue against the materialist hypothesis, not because I believe it's any more wrong than anything else, but because most people are so bought into it. And so it's just nice to have a voice of the opposition to try to pull the rug out from under the knee-jerk assumption that, well, no, that's right. You know, just as a way of stimulating fresh perspective, you know, to be able to be with our experience and in a fresh light, rather than just, you know, certainty that things are a certain way.
And it's an interesting, just as an interesting parenthetical, that, you know, in the cutting edge of the materialist worldview, which if you can take it to say, you know, quantum mechanics, they're actually seeing things in the thing that's saying, well, no, you know, is the epiphenomenon of consciousness anyway.
Yeah, space and time are out the window. Causality is out the window. The arrow of time's out the window. Matter, I mean, you know, the whole thing
That's
is.
materialist.
Yeah,
What they're getting.
the materialism, the modern materialism is not materialist anymore. It all, even vaguely, you know, and you know, normal thought or even intelligent thought of modern people is lagging so far behind the times of you know, current research and current theory. But it's all theories, you know, and the final theory has not been said. In my opinion, the final theory will never be said, because what this, I mean, what this is transcendental, and by that I mean it is not any way at all. That is a way, and a theory implies a way. You know, oh, it works like this, it works like that. What it really is this, what it really is that.
It transcends itself.
It seems to. I mean, it just seems to me to be endlessly weird. That's my take on this from direct knowing of it. And I think that anyone will arrive at the same take through direct knowing as well. But that itself is a theory. And to verbalize it is a theory.
Does this, I don't know what to call it, but when these understandings, or whatever you want to call them, became clearer to you, did you behave any differently in different situations, or did you just
initially, yes.
differently?
Initially, I behaved very differently. I got myself locked up.
I mean, after that, later, because you said there were years that you were kind of, I don't know what to call it, adjusting to it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, like, what's an example of, I mean, is it any different when you walk into a supermarket? Is it, you know, is it, you know what I'm saying?
It's very different. There's an open-endedness and a spontaneity and an unknown element that is palpable and vibrant. And, you know, actually it always has been, except that when I was locked into simplistic interpretations of things in my youth, I just didn't notice that. I didn't let myself notice it. There's the certainty of surprise, the certainty that I do not know what experience will look like in the next instant, and the certainty that I don't know what it looks like in the present instant. Even as it looks like it looks, I don't know what that is. I mean, there's lots of knowing, there's lots of powerful analysis and intelligence, and I can talk very articulately about the details of what's present in my experience in any situation. But basically, that's always scratching the surface, and there's always like this vast, you know, I don't have words for it, vast, unresolvable, you know, alternative infinities. You know, it's just all bullshit and poetry. But it's palpable. So, you know, my experience doesn't stop with what I know. What I know, which is a lot. I mean, I'm an intelligent guy, and I have strong analytical and thinking capabilities. So at least I claim that. But that's very, very, very superficial in the face of this amazing, astounding, surprising wow. And that's palpable. In terms of actual behavior, that implies a kind of a looseness and spontaneity and maybe unpredictability and maybe a little bit of eccentricity or who knows what. Or maybe I'm just like that. But the unresolvability of this is very palpable. And when you tune into it, when you let yourself notice it, it's blatantly obvious. It's not a subtle thing. It's a gross, heavy-handed, really obvious wow factor, and it's always an experience. And experience is, I will assert experience is intrinsically that for everyone all the time. But when we have a normalcy or a worldview that we're oriented to, we censor the awareness of that surprising wow factor to a large extent, and we sort of are in a more plodding linear process where, oh, I'm here to do this, and what's happening is that, and we sort of create a censored, defined situation to some extent that's imposed on this unknown, and so not doing that, or doing that less, it enables more palpable, immediate access to the sense of this, the unknown of it, which gives access to to alternatives. It gives access to spontaneity and inspiration and who knows what, I would say, in terms of behaviorally or what have you.
But you still get the groceries and go back home, right?
Usually. Sometimes I forget, like, why did I come here again? I phone my wife, no, I forgot my phone. Oh, well, get something and go home. Hopefully I'm not too far. Yeah, sure, of course.
You're not going to stop.
Functioning happens, but functioning is another interesting thing. We assume functioning is, normally, let's say, people assume functioning is a matter of keeping it together, remembering things and knowing things. But in actuality, functioning is done through a kind of an energy surfing, You don't drive a car by thinking about how to do it. You don't drive a car by having a checklist. You drive a car by getting in and doing it. You don't walk. I don't walk by, thinking, oh, let me see, I have to tighten this muscle, loosen that muscle. I have to shift my weight slightly, till I'm just falling over and I have to move, It's not like that, is it? You just do it. So it's a direct participation in dynamic energy that is, seemingly participatable with, right? And driving is like that, and all functioning is like that. Like we're talking about having a conversation. How do you know what words to come up with, and how do you make your mouth make those? How does that happen? You just do it. Yeah, automatic. But to say it's automatic doesn't make it less so. What it actually is a direct, surfing, molding or riding the energy that your vocal cords and your mind and your thought and all is made of, and being with that in a real-time improvisation. Maybe, that's one way to put it. So. And it doesn't require logic. In fact, it's completely illogical. You just do it. You don't know what any of it is. You can't possibly say how you do it. How do you think what to say? And how do you control your mouth and vocal cords to say it? And then how do you process whatever is you hear and to come up with something to say back? It's like a dance. And so that's how functioning works. So functioning is by direct energy participation. There may be thought and analysis involved, but it's usually a kind of a Greek chorus off to the side that isn't actually much of a part of the actual. Yeah, you talk to yourself. We talk to ourselves and pretend that is actually part of our doing, rather than just a meaningless annoyance. And all of this becomes much more obvious the more more you are with just the, the raw, the immediate presence of the experiential field, as opposed to abstracting it in all these structures and holding it to have all this process.
Getting back to my question about the red light, or concept. The more I think about it, and also just what you said, you can still have the word or the idea, but as you start noticing more, the unknown becomes the largest part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
It becomes the most, the most prominent, obvious.
Yeah, because it's the actuality.
The more real it becomes.
Yeah.
More real.
Yeah. I mean, one very, it's sort of a superficial and almost trite way to put it, but it's actually pretty profoundly accurate. As one goes through this process of unfoldment or reorientation to one's nature, everything sort of turns completely upside down. When you're in ignorance and relating to things through an interpretive framework, what you think are concrete actualities is actually abstractions, and what you think are abstractions are actually concrete actualities. And as you sort of shift from orienting in terms of interpretive frameworks to the actual, experiential presence, that sort of turns around, and you begin to see, all these words and things and all that are abstractions. The actuality is this amazing, amorphous but actual, infinity of conditions, which seems very vague and theoretical and abstract from an interpretive when this is this and that's that, and within an interpretive framework. So it's very interesting the way it's like black turns to white and up turns to down.
Yeah, so what included was when that term, when you were using the term palpable. It is.
Yeah. And what palpable means turns upside down too.
Well, yeah.
Because you think that, that objects are palpable, whereas actually the transcendental energy is what is the only thing that is palpable, and objects are abstractions within that. Which is, it's just a really interesting. It's almost literally 180. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's not particularly useful necessarily, but it's an interesting observation that it's like that.
For me, more and more, there's this sense of trust and appreciation for the unknown, I guess you could say. Just not the idea of having it together. Well, okay, but there's so much that isn't even part of that scheme that it's not even a matter of controlling it. But being with that is kind of beautiful.
It's exquisitely beautiful and easy and fascinating and aesthetically satisfying, artistically stimulating. Every aspect of it is just this amazing lusciousness and meaningfulness. You're the ultimate art appreciator when you're with experience, because you're sensitive to all of this nuance and dimensionality and texture and all these luscious qualities that experience is constituted.
I guess for me now, it's it's a process of coming into that, and there's still some tugging, I suppose, at the old ways, but just more and more, there's just this like unknown trust.
Yeah, sure.
It's there, but I couldn't even possibly describe what it is.
Sure. And wherever you are in this process, whether you're just beginning to toy with this stuff, or you're have been working with it for years, the engagement is always exactly the same. It's just let yourself notice that you are feeling actual experience, and notice that you don't, as you feel it, you'll notice you can't pin it down. You can't say exactly what it is. Just that fact alone. And that's easy to do for anyone, no matter how, no matter how you're used to orient your experience, whether you're used to feeling very certain that things are a certain way or not. Still in all, just like these kind of exercises we do in the morning meditation and stuff, just feel the presence of experience, feel the presence of light, feel the presence of color, feel the presence of thought, feel the presence of sound. Anyway, just slightly. It's not like you have to go the distance or do anything with it or achieve anything, but just that contact alone is transformative because it is irrational. It's not an idea, it's not a concept, it makes no sense. Experiencing makes no sense, but it's an undeniable actuality. The presence of light makes no sense. You can't analyze it. The presence of color makes no sense. The presence of touch makes no sense. And yet it's an undeniable actuality. And so right away, you are experiencing the unknown. And even if it's just a slight thing, that's enough. And that is, it's like opening Pandora's box. It's, this infinity or undefinability of actuality will draw you into it. And it's the same, even if you're very advanced and have been working with this for years and basically have very little relational framework that seems to be entrapping to you at all. It's still the same thing, just exactly the same, very simple process. So the process of this yoga, what I call this yoga, is so simple. Just feel presence as it is. And it reveals, it does all the work. The very nature of what it is transcendental because it is intrinsically transcendental. It's intrinsically unresolvable. It's intrinsically indefinable. It's mysterious, and yet it's actual, it's real. It's not a concept, it's not an abstraction. And you don't need to do it. It's already doing itself. So it's just right here, just you feel that, and that right there, that's the entire process. So there's no elaboration, there's no gradation, there's no like advanced course. Now you're the good techniques. It's just totally simple. It's the obviousness of the actuality of experience is the method that reveals the actuality of experience.
I'm really noticing the songs in my head. And what used to be an annoyance is now it's kind of like, well, I don't know that it's a gift, but it provokes noticing.
Sure.
Because it's so obviously strange that that's occurring. I'm doing something, and here's the Bee Gees, or here's Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But the fact that it's there is so strange, it kicks in on noticing.
Yeah, of course, exactly so. Or the presence of thought, anything.
Yeah.
Nothing, you can use what ordinarily would have been an annoyance or a frustration as a very fruitful vehicle for noticing, because whatever it is, how is it here? What is it that's here? And right away, bang, it's wow, Why? How can thought be present? What is thought? How can thought be present in mind? What is argument? What is emotion? What is annoyance? What is desire? What are these? There are these mysterious upwellings of absolute, wow, and it's so and it's so palpable and obvious, and that draws you to that mode of wow, that mode of undefined actuality. It teaches you how to do what it is by being what it is. And you actually are what it is, so it's all very effortless and automatic.
Yeah, there feels like a gradation or some, kind of what starts out as a feeling of destabilizing, and we were talking today, like whoa. There's also it seems like a come-hitherness to
Oh yeah, it's seductive, it's luscious. I mean, it ultimately and very rapidly becomes hedonism. It's like so much fun. It's like, oh yeah, it's like going to a museum and looking at fabulous art. You look at a Van Gogh or something, and it's just, oh, I'm melting. It's just so luscious. And experience is that, and it becomes palpably that. So so readily.
Lucidity is a word that kind of shows up. I don't even know what the word lucidity means. But in this,
it sounds good.
In this discussion,
it sounds profound.
As we talk about it, there's a sense of lucidity, like a lucid dream. It becomes a lucid dream, whatever that image evokes in me, or whatever's evoked in me when I hear lucid dream, seems to be a description of some sort of the depth.
I think that's very meaningful. I mean, you'll notice that this kind of an image of light or radiance, it shows up all across the board in terms of any degree of spiritual realization, enlightenment, all these kinds of words, which imply, this radiance that basically just feeling the astounding dynamic amazingness of the experiential field, which is, it reveals itself as fundamentally radiant, fundamentally a lucidity, fundamentally a play of light or something. Not necessarily literally, and yet very meaningfully so. And again, this is palpable, and ultimately these words are essentially poetic. They're not actually very literally referring to anything, but still it's very evocative, and I think it is meaningful to see it in these terms. I mean, spirituality is often said to be moving from darkness to light, moving from closeness to openness, and all this kind of imagery. And again, it's not necessarily literally true, but it is meaningful to refer to use these kinds of images because it resonates. But and in a more immediate sense, any degree of actual spiritual realization is very analogous to a lucid dream, where you get a direct hit on, wow, well, the way I thought things were, it's not like that. It's something wholly different, and generally as a lightening and loosening and fun making and joyous realization of off the hookness.
Totally.
Before I was stuck in this situation, I had to make sense of it or do something or achieve something, and all of a sudden, oh, it's just a dream. Who cares? And it's very analogous to any degree of spiritual progress, so to speak, or spiritual insight, which typically consists of finding that a way that one was unconsciously holding things to be is actually not the case, and what is the case is beyond that, outside that. So of course you're free from that, which is very much like when you're lost in a dream and holding it to be objectively true. You're holding that, oh, I'm stuck in this circumstance. I've got to grapple with this and make some sense of it and get my way through it. And when you go lucid, it's, oh, I'm not in any circumstance at all. I don't need to get my way through anything. What a load off, And it's exactly analogous to the discovery that, gosh, what I thought was going on here, what I thought I had to solve or work with or struggle with, just isn't actually the case. Like, what a release,
Yeah. The thing is, when I hear the word note, which is a word you use, and notice, and the notice immediately gets appropriated by the mind.
Right, oh, yeah.
It becomes an intellectual exercise, which is of course taking me somewhere. It's making everything that was at all translucent absolutely opaque again.
Oh, yeah.
So the noticing is accessible when there's a lucidity on the horizon.
No, it's all very catch-22.
Yeah.
You know, it's all very catch-22. As soon as you try and do it, all of a sudden you're trying to do something which it succeeds in bollocksing up the words.
Add layers to the rock.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
You know, but there's generally when the mind gets ammunition and gets a foothold out of complexity, and in general, the simplest noticing technique is the most naked of just feeling experience. It's like the mind just can't really do much with that. You know, the mind can say, the mind can try, but it you know, just feeling the presence of life, feeling the presence of experience, feeling the presence of sound, feeling the presence of texture. You know, I mean, it's so non-mental,
Yeah.
intrinsically, and it's so immediate, and so you know, just pregnant with information, with quality, with nuance, with dynamism, with vitality. You know, it's just nowhere near anything the mind can do much appropriately with. I mean, of course, it actually can, and it's very skilled at that, but still in all, you know, it's a kind of a trick to undercut that, what it is. And the nice thing about noticing is you don't need to do it right, you don't need to do it well, you don't need to do it thoroughly. Just a tiny little hint is potent. You know, just a little hiccup of, wow, sunset, or you see a pretty girl, or you hear a startlement, you know, someone honks their horn unexpectedly, and it's like, you know, just right away, it's like, wow, you know, that was something, and that wasn't an idea, and that really happens. You know, that's a presence, and just that, all of a sudden, bang, you know, that's a little mini bubble burster. Doesn't mean to be gender biased. See a handsome man, ladies, or handsome girl if you're
Pretty boy.
or pretty boy if you're going.
I'm getting self-conscious.
Yeah.
Try to be PC here.
You're a PG, so.
So unusual.
Not more never. Not in this crowd.
It's a lie. Any excuse for a joke.
You're a complete maniac tonight.
Says you.
What did she say?
He's a complete maniac.
Any more so than ever?
Today it's been a pretty full-on day.
So was yesterday.
This retreat's been very interesting for me. I felt more out of control than usual. I have basically no idea what I'm doing, so. I mean, in a sense, I usually don't. I usually have no idea what I'm doing, but I kind of feel more like I do. Most of the time. This time it's very explicit that I'm totally clueless. So I'm showing up to these meetings. What's going to happen? Another train wreck. But fortunately, the very fortunate thing is the nature of this is not a matter of anything I do or don't do. It's about what this is. That has all the potency, all the meaningfulness is in simply the nature of objectivity, the nature of the objective fact of the presence of the experiential field. So I can be a complete klutz and a jerk, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't damage that at all. So I don't need to, it's not about me. It's not about what I do. All I need to do is just like point. Look at that.
We would talk about that actually today, because it seems like, in our place of employment recently, that seems to be more and more the case.
Which?
It's just that I don't have no clue what I'm doing. I don't even know how to do it. But other people seem to think I'm still doing quite a good job, even though, you know, I'm finally like, no, just can't do that anymore. So it's sort of this odd paradox that mostly I'm just sitting at my desk staring at the wall. And
but if it's job you're
people don't
doing.
notice.
How convenient.
I've made a mistake of confiding in my son about that. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what anything is.
Don't tell your kids that. When they reach adulthood, then you can. By the way, I was faking.
Yeah, I know. I didn't wait too early.
But you don't want to undermine your authority too early.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm already sorry. It's not so lucid when he shows up.
A certain amount of arbitrary authority is useful in parenting situations.
What's really good is to predict something in some behavior they're doing, like you're a magician. Like, that helps you get a bunch of authority too.
Get some credit.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the, and maybe it speaks to whatever we're talking about here, the notion of, you know, there's a story coming from that entity. Okay. And there's a very opaque discussion going on, something about something very opaque. And at some point in my fathering learning curve, there was trying to move him to see it as more of a translucent thing or something else. And then again, but here the curve seems to be, well, okay, what does it look like? Well, it's a red light. Okay. And so you responded to the red light. Was it scary? Well, it was a red light. Well, describe a red light. And bits of pink in it. Suddenly, like the focus and giving it space, it seems to dissipate more often than not by allowing it to be described, and then therefore there is no real description of it. It turns out to be part of some, dreamed up object, as opposed to, and the more I engage with it, the more I encourage the objectiveness of it.
Right.
And so, of course, I forget to do that.
So if it really is about just noticing what's always available in our experience, can you speak a little bit about the benefits of sitting in these kind of rooms and listening to your descriptions?
Well, it's arbitrary. There's not necessarily any benefit at all. There may be benefit if it's provocative, if it's stimulating, if it's jarring, if in any way it induces or suggests some kind of a fresh perspective, or just anything. That's anything that it was sort of a rule of thumb in getting unstuck. If you want to characterize spirituality as a process of getting progressively unstuck, a rule of thumb is to get yourself pushed out of your comfort zone, either by something you're doing or something is being imposed on you, or something that you're placing yourself in the way of that then hits you or whatever. So getting out of your comfort zone, in other words, being forced into something unusual, something not normal. And a retreat like this, for most people, is not normal. How often do you sit? I don't know. How often do you spend all day sitting in a room talking about weird stuff with a bunch of strangers? Just that fact alone, regardless of if it's all gibberish, it's unusual. It's kind of like, what am I doing here? Right away it's provocative in all kinds of subliminal ways. And that is potentially valuable, not in itself, but as a provocation. It's like it's shaking the container of sand, and the sand has an opportunity to resettle itself because you're shaking. And in that, there's opportunity. So, I mean, good spiritual experiments is to get outside of your comfort zone. Place your, you can do it very, very mechanistically and sort of grossly by just placing yourself in environments you don't usually go into. If you usually hang out among civilized intellectual people, go to a rough bar sometime, or vice versa. You can place yourself in unfamiliar or relatively unusual social context or physical context, take up skydiving, or whatever. Again, not because that in itself is particularly valuable or important, but because it's a provocation. It's a slight, you're shaking things up, which is an opportunity to resettle in potentially interesting way.
I can be skydiving right now.
Yeah, right. What am I doing in this stupid retreat?
Proves anything is possible.
So that kind of begs the comment that if spiritual retreats have kind of become a normalcy,
Yeah.
not as productive as.
Oh, definitely. If spirituality is your normalcy, go out and start hanging out with,
Get a life.
Yeah, get a life. Yeah, get a life. Start hanging out with real people. Leave, don't come to California. Yeah, go to Houston. Hang out in Houston for a while. That's a sure remedy for spirituality.
Earlier today, he was talking about at some point, the lucidity, he was talking about somebody, lucidity becomes the norm, and just to play with it, there's the need to put oneself in a position that's very opaque, like going to a biker bar.
Yeah.
And then, so how does lucidity show up in this obviously very different and potentially frightening situation? Where's the lucidity here?
Yeah.
Therefore, it's like even heightened.
Sure.
In the sense of, wow, I can even find it here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, on a tangent from this discussion, it's interesting too that the whole arc of spiritual unfoldment is kind of like a parabolic curve, because the way direction it seems to be moving in the first half of it is diametrically opposite from the direction it seems to be moving in the second half of it. Like when a cannonball goes up and then tops out and then comes down. Because at first, one is working to extricate oneself from frames of reference and from holding things to be a certain way. And when one develops sufficient facility at that, then you begin to let go of needing to extricate, and you begin to let yourself settle into these frames of reference and see the way in which that is actually the same thing. And that's how you become bulletproof. That's how you become Teflon. Is not only, so you have skill at extricating yourself from these frames of reference, but then you can go into them and see the way in which that's exactly the same. And then whether you're in a frame of reference or not, whether you're lucid or being a complete brainwashed idiot, it's all the same. And that's the high water mark of liberation. The high water mark of liberation isn't sitting on a mountain in the Himalayas levitating, chanting Om. The high water mark is not needing to be doing that. You can be in the grocery store and fighting your way in a traffic jam, and someone give you the finger and give them the finger back, and have that be just the same as sitting on levitating in the Himalayas. The high water mark of liberation is not needing to be liberated, because there's nothing to be liberated from. But don't worry about that until it becomes relevant. Assuming that, that's not already right what you're working. So you got to fight your way to get liberated, to get free, and then you let go of needing to be free, and become free of being free.
Kind of gets into like why you do anything though. Find yourself going on certain kinds of retreats because you seem to be sort of drawn to it.
Sure.
Then I try and get a little better at just going with it. This seems to be, a lot of things pull my attention, and so like I try to get a little bit quieter and sort out. Okay, I'm not going to do every one of those things, but I don't think 10 years ago would come somewhere that not that much was going on.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, but that's it. You're drawn to engaging with what seems relevant or powerful or whatever interesting at the time. This is the
And
way of life.
sometimes it's like a conversation with some random person that you're standing in line in a grocery store with or something.
But there's no worries because, right, whatever arises as it does is absolutely appropriate for
Of course.
fulfillment.
Of course. The present moment can't be other than it is. Even if there is no single way that it is, it still can't be other than it is. And so engaging with the present moment in any way that your inspiration suggests is always appropriate, because that's ultimately the only thing you can do. What can you do than doing what you're doing right here, right now, always. Because you're always right here, right now, and you're always doing whatever you're doing. So if that's not appropriate, you're shit out of luck.
It just makes it so easy. It's just non-problematic.
Yeah. This is, the simplest and also, it turns out, the shortest path of spirituality is absolutely no specialness. Just doing what you're doing, being what you're being at the instant is the path and is the short path. Having the specialness and something you're supposed to do and something else you're trying not to do and all of this complexity is just tying yourself in knots, and it's actually a fabrication. It's a pretense. It's a kind of an arrogance of trying to be special, as opposed to just, well, here I am, this is what's happening, let's, do whatever it seems appropriate to do.
It's also kind of another way of saying that, with all on the one end of the spectrum, there's the subtle touching and noticing of textures and all of that. And on the other end of that, there's just the sheer brute fucking fact that there's anything at all. Just that. And that's a...
Yeah. And they're both actually the same,
right.
Two different ways of parsing the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. The radical, extreme nature of this condition is ever present.
Yeah.
You can take it as far as you want, and it's right here, meeting you.
The switch is so on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is absolute reality. This is absolute reality. The primal issues and questions are right here. You want to check out being and non-being? This is where you look. You want to check out what's for dinner? This is where you look. Same issue. It's totally amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Just that word on, I know that turns my system on.
There's
no off to be found.
There's no off to be
If there's
found.
any off, it's fully on.
Oh, yeah. This is it. This is real. This is on. This is happening. It's bang. Yeah. To the nth degree.
Yeah.
To the superlative of the superlative. It's just it.
which makes missing that seem like the miracle, so.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that can happen is absolutely miraculous, and you know, reiterates the incredibleness of this astounding condition. How can this possibly miss itself so thoroughly?
Sometimes when you are pointing out for us to just look at what is, it's almost like my mind takes it as a trick question. Like, you know, I have to look somewhere special, you know?
Well, in a way it is. For your mind, it is.
Yeah,
I'm always playing tricks on your mind.
yeah.
Mind won't respect you unless you play tricks on it. So that's its
Yeah,
whole.
I know. That's why it took me a little while to know that, like, you know, on some level, just like whatever, rather than, oh, I have to see what does he mean? It's right here.
Let me figure this out. Let me stop and think about this.
You know, it's like, you know, and I'm not doing it right.
Peter, back to Nan's question about doing things like this.
Mhm.
I've never done this before. So in your experience, an energy, let's say, of a kind of discovery in a room, does it generate anything? I mean, if you're talking to, you know, in a bar with a bunch of people, does it generate anything different, or in terms of a general discovering energy?
Perhaps. I mean, you can seem
There you
to.
go. See? You look at that.
That was a big question.
It must be in a bar.
You knocked you out.
Next question.
No, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, you know, these kinds of events are very interesting because there can seem to be a kind of a pervasive atmosphere that kind of gets created. I mean, it's almost like a theatrical event, you know, these sort of, the dramatic, you know, performance evokes a certain mood that can seem to sort of permeate the environment. But again, it's not actually like that because it's always individual and one-on-one, and everyone has a different take on what's going on for them. And so, you know, you can't really answer that question. But it certainly seems as if there are certain, you know, things like that are going on, whatever it is. But you can't say definitively one way or the other about it.
I mean, for me, I don't even know, I think I know that it provides a certain comfort to notice. There's an encouragement to notice, and I'm with a group of whatever
Sure.
that are encouraged to notice,
Sure.
as opposed to, what are you talking about?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's nice because it's working with our psychology, it's working with our tribalism. We all have an innate motivation to subtly echo the behavior and the functioning of the people around us. And so when you're with a group of people where the stance is a certain way, there's a natural sort of an unconscious inclination to sort of mimic that or participate in that. And that's, yeah, you're using it for your advantage if that's something you're trying to, you know, stimulate or whatever. It's interesting. I mean, for me, this issue you're bringing up is, and related aspects of it, is always a kind of a challenge because in these kinds of spiritual events, it's almost ubiquitous across the board for people to manipulatively, I mean, not maliciously necessarily, but manipulatively and hypnotically create a mood. And to a certain extent, that's inevitable, because using words and gestures and presentations is essentially has hypnotic aspects. You know, it becomes a kind of a to some extent self-fulfilling suggestion to the listeners that has impact. But a lot of times in spirituality that's done deliberately, and the mood that's achieved is held to be the point of the thing. And I quite deliberately try to minimize that and try to even counter that, because to me that's a distraction. It's so easy. It's a missing the forest for the trees kind of thing. It's so easy to go to the spiritual event and someone is, they're talking like this about the transcendental beauty and the peace and I mean it's like, oh yeah, that's great, you know. And you just,
That becomes the new object.
yeah, it becomes, you begin to interpret, oh, that is what it's about, and getting that feeling again is good. So I'm going to the next meeting so I can get that feeling again, you know. And that's not empowering. That's creating a follower. That's creating an addict of a particular situation, which can be useful if it's, you know, if you're getting people to give you money for it. All right, come on, this is great. Come on in. Come to the next one. Yeah, right. Well, yeah, that's a little more directive. Just deal heroin.
Gotta get a
right?
license.
But you know, I try to, you know, to a large extent, I try to deliberately counter that and deliberately undermine that, because it's such a distraction. That's not what it's about. It's about noticing. It's not about the specialness or a special mood. It's about noticing what is always the case, even when it's not a special mood. And so you know, this seduction into specialness and special moods is, you know, is kind of it's a problem. as a kind of a present, as I'm here, I set myself up in this situation, and I'm presenting this and trying to do all this stuff, and it can be very tempting to use that kind of stuff. But I disagree. I don't like it at all, because it's counterproductive. It's not doing anyone any favors. Even if it's kind of fun, it's easy to do. Well, I mean, you're an actor. It's the same. If you're doing a good job performing, you're doing magic. You're hypnotizing people into.
And I'm not there.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, the structure of the thing creates an ambiance that is palpable and that it's a rush. You know, it's a thing. But, you know, for this purpose, that's counterproductive. That's actually working. That's a distraction. You know. So, anyway.
It just reminds me of listening to something Adyashanti said one time, where he said it's like people come sometimes to his talks. He goes, because they want to feel better, and that's not the point at all. You know, even if they might end up feeling better, but that's not what the intent is.
Shall we adjourn for the evening?
So tomorrow night, biker bar in Yucca Valley?
Biker bar in Yucca Valley.
7 o'clock?
Drinks are on me.
There must be Yucca Valley, come on.
Drinks are on Michael.
There we go.
Why tomorrow night? Why not just go now?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You're talking.
What's the matter with me?
Tomorrow afternoon, skydive.
Bowling.
It's only 8:30.
I think they have a bar at the bowling alley. Let's go bowling.
Yeah, let's go bowling. And rent bowling shoes.
I will be thinking of you as I lie in bed going to sleep.
He's sleeping.
The biker bar hasn't opened yet, that's why we're not going.